My name is Alfredo Aranda, and we're going to continue with lesson number 2, and it's counterpoint, first species, and it's a note against one note. In other words, is the impact of one note against the other note. It could be one whole note against a whole note, or half note against another half note. And for that, there are some rules that we need to follow. The first thing we need to know is that the cantus firmus, or the melody, could be on the bottom voice or the top voice. And when you have the counterpoint or the cantus firmus on the bottom voice, then you have the counterpoint on the other voice. All right, so here are some rules that we need to follow. I'm gonna focus a little more. Okay, so the first species in the cantus firmus and having the cantus firmus in the lower voice is this. In this species, you may use two types of intervals. If you don't know what's an interval, then you might like to check the theory videos, solfeggio and music theory book. But if you do, continue with this video. So in this species, there is only two intervals, or actually three, that can be used. One are called the consonant intervals and the conditional intervals when resolved correctly. I'm going to explain what that is in a little bit. The consonant intervals are first, the third, the fifth, the sixth, and the octaves. The conditional intervals are the augmented fourth, diminished fifth, major second when the fourth and the fifth degree of the scale is used. For example, in the key of C, the fourth degree is the F, and the fifth degree of the scale is G. So when you have the G and the F together, or the F and the G, that's a major second. That's the only one you can use as a conditional interval. And then you need to resolve it accordingly. That's why it's called conditional, because it has a condition to be used. And the minor seventh, which is the opposite, when you have the G on the bottom and the F on the top, then that's a minor seventh. That's the only minor seventh that you can use in this species. You may not use dissonant intervals. Which are the dissonant? The dissonants are the second, fourth, and seventh, besides the ones that we talked about, that are the conditional intervals. Example, in the key of C major, a first is when you have one from C to C, a third is one from C to E, a fifth is from C to G, and a sixth is from C to A, an octave is from C to C. I skipped the seventh because these are not consonant. So the first, the third, the fifth, the sixth, and the eighth. And it could be not starting from C, or it could be starting from any other note of the C scale. You cannot modulate yet until we explain the rules for that. Let's say you start with the note D. So the first would be from D to D, a third from D to F, a fifth from D to A, sixth from D to B, an octave from D to D. And the same thing goes for the E, the F, and all the other notes. So these are the consonant intervals. It is very important to memorize the consonant intervals, which are the first, third, fifth, sixth, and eighth. That means that those intervals are nice. They sound good together. Okay, now the conditional intervals. The conditional intervals are the notes that belong to the 5 chord with the 7. Not all of them, but the ones that contain the 7th of the chord. In the key of C, the G chord is the 5 chord with the 7, being G, B, D, F. So if you notice, the F is contained in all the conditional intervals. And the other note may vary. So the F goes to E all the time, and the C goes to, the B goes to C. And if you have the F on the top, the F still goes to E, and the B goes to C. And then you have the F that goes to E, and the G goes to C. And when you have the G on the bottom, the F on the top, the F goes to E, and the G goes to C. Memorize the direction in which each note goes, and you'll be surprised as to how good you're gonna get just knowing these little things. The dissonant intervals are the second, the fourth, the seventh, when those are not part of the conditionals, of course. Like if you have a seventh starting from C, that is not permitted, or a second from starting from C or from D or from any other note, except the ones that we talked about previously. Okay, so with that information, we are ready to start our first exercise. Let's just call it an exercise. Is that a song yet? So in the key of C, we made a melody, C, D, E, D, F, E, D, C. It can be any other melody, it doesn't have to be that. Okay, the first measure. This first measure defines in which key you are writing that composition. So in this case, we're in the key of C. So only notes that belong to the first degree of the scale, the chord, C, E, G, may be part of this first measure. The bottom one needs to be C because it defines the key in which you are making a melody, but the counterpoint note could be any other note. So in this case, we chose an E, which is the third of the chord. Okay, now, in the key of G, I gave another example. The melody is a little bit different, but we're going to focus on the first measure. In this case, I chose the D because it's the fifth of the chord. Remember, we're in the key of G now, and this was on the key of C. So another example, in the key of D, same melody that starts with the D and ends with the D because this is the key of D. So the D is the counterpoint melody. So it could be the third, the fifth, or the octave, and that's pretty simple. Okay, now let's see another very important rule. Once we have that, let's go to the end of the melody. In the case of the cantus firmus that is in the key of C, there's only two choices. It needs to end on a first or an octave interval only. So in the key of C, it would be another C, an octave apart. In the key of G, I chose an interval of a first. In the key of D, an interval of an octave. So we have two measures that are taken care of. But now let's do another part. Second to the last measure. It is a very important measure. Why? Because it makes us, or let us finish a song. You cannot just finish a melody. You can just say, you need certain very important notes that make you finish a note. For example, in the key of C, the D goes to a C, and the B goes to a C. So those are notes that make you finish a song. In other words, if you check the notes that belong to the 5 chord, in this case G, B, D, those are the notes that let you finish a song. Try it with your guitar, piano, whatever, and you'll see how those notes will feel like, boom, you're done with the song. Okay, in the key of G, another example, we used another note. And in the first example, we used the B, which is an interval of a 6. On the second example, we use a fifth, and it still has the notes that belong to the 5 chord but in this case, the 5 chord is D, F, A. And on the following example, the 5 chord is an A chord because we're in the key of D. So it depends what key you are in. That's the notes that you're choosing. So the second to the last chord will always be notes that belong to the 5 chord. Okay, now let's see other things. When we use, this is a full exercise already done, but we're going to focus on these measures only. So let's say in the middle of the song you have an F on the cantus firmus, and that F goes to a note or the E note. That means you can have a B on top to make it an augmented fourth interval, forcing the B to go to a C and the F to an E. That's the way you need to resolve that interval because it's a conditional interval. It needs to be resolved that way, or else it's going to sound bad. And then when you have the fifth, which is the opposite or inverted interval, the B and the F, even if it's more than an octave apart, it's called the fifth diminished fifth. The B goes to the C and the F goes to the E. Exactly the same thing. So, but now remember that you can use other things. For example, if you have a B and an F, a B normally goes to the E and the F to the B goes to the C and the F goes to the E. But if you have a diminished fifth, you can follow it with the unaugmented fourth because those are the same notes. It's just like you're prolonging the resolution of these two notes. You're given the responsibility of resolving to the same notes. Why? Because they are the same. The F goes to the and the C. B goes to the C. And the same thing happens when you start with the augmented fourth and then the diminished fifth, and you need to finish this. The B goes to the C, the F goes to the E. Another thing that you can do with the conditional intervals, like for example, this one that is in the gray area, the F goes to the E. Remember, the F is very important. If you put it together with the G, then that interval is being forced to go to the chord that is the number 1 chord, which is C, E, G. Even if you have just 2 notes of that chord, like the F goes to the E and the G goes to the C. And if you have the 7th interval, minor 7, the one that starts with the G, because remember you have to use the notes that belong to the 5-7 chord. The G goes to the C and the F goes to the E. So Let's just focus on the gray area. Even though you see the whole or all the complete exercise, let's just focus on that. Okay. The same way you can prolong the resolution of each node, letting the last interval of the conditional sequence resolve. For example, normally, if you have the A and the G would have to go to the C and the F to the E, but it didn't. It continued with another conditional interval. And then the responsibility to resolve is of this interval, which is the B and the F, but it didn't. It prolonged it a little more, having an F and a B, which is the augmented fourth. So this is just like a family of conditional intervals that they all belong to the 5/7 chord. The last one is the one that needs to resolve, and it does here. The F goes to the E, and the B goes to the C. And you can have it in any order you want. Like in this case, we have an augmented fourth, diminished fifth, and the second, major second. And it did resolve to the same interval. Okay, the first, the fifth, and the eighth, those are intervals that are not so pretty when you have many of them one after the other. Uh, they're like very shallow intervals, like in this case, and that's why they are not permitted when you have two consecutive octaves or fifths. Like in this example, you have a D and a D that goes to the C and the C. That is a parallel octave. That is not allowed. Or a fifth in any direction, going down or going up. There's another not permitted interval with a fifth. When both of the voices, the bottom and the top, jump. When I say jump, they're not gradual. For example, this one, the top note is B, jumped to the D because there's another note that fits in between. That's called jumping. It makes a leap. And when both notes make a leap, even though the first one in this case is not a fifth, it's equally not permitted. You shouldn't do that. Same thing if it goes up or down. If it goes to a fifth, or if it goes in the same direction or parallel to an octave. It doesn't have to be like two consecutive octaves. So if you go to an octave or a fifth, jumping or leaping from one, especially the top note. The bottom one is not that important, but the top note, it has the same effect as the parallel octaves. Direct is called direct fifth, direct octave, or parallel fifth, or parallel octaves. And in this other example, we have a sixth that makes a parallel movement to the octave, which is not permitted. However, there are some direct fifths or octaves that are permitted. And that happens when the top note goes gradually to the top of the fifth. That softens the impact of the fifth because it's a gradual movement from the top. Okay, the next example, it's going down. Notice that the E goes to the D very gradually. The other one jumps because it's to an octave. Okay, and now on this page, on page 21, we have a sample of the cantus firmus. Look at the cantus firmus right here. C, D, E, D, F, E, D, C. Remember, we need to start with one of the 1, 5, 5th, or 8th interval. And this is how it started. And these are the ways that you can move in the counterpoint on the first species. If the bottom note goes up, ascends gradually, then the counterpoint melody may descend gradually, creating a gradual contrary motion, which is the best, the most desirable movement. It's not necessarily the only one, but it's the most desirable. You you may want to always look for that, but it is not always possible. Like the second measure, the D goes to the E, and the other D goes in contrary motion to the C. And then likewise, when the E goes to the D, down, then the C goes up. It's contrary motion. And on the fourth measure, we have like a D that jumps into an F. And the top note also jumps into a B. You can do that with no problem. Anyway, you go to the augmented fourth or diminished fifth, you will be okay from any interval. Okay, as long as you resolve it as we explained a little bit before. The F goes to the E, the B goes to the C. And then to finish, we need notes that belong to the 5 chord. The D goes to the C and the B goes to the C. And there is our first example of how we should move the voices. You should practice. There are many possibilities that you can do. Because, for example, when you have consecutive sixths or thirds, you can do the entire song with fifths and sixths, and that is not going to be a problem. Only that the counterpoint technique, it's for you to create movement, individual melodies that can go up or down in many ways. If you just use sixths and thirds, that is not going to be very creative. I mean, they all sound good. However you place this, the third and the sixth, it will sound good because it's a very likable, sweet interval. And you can go from one sixth to another sixth to another sixth forever if you want. And you can do the same thing with the thirds, and it will always sound good. But it will not be very creative because that's very easy. Okay, let's say this is another exercise. This one, it's it's like the one we made up here, only that this is just by itself. So this is letting you know that whenever you write the melody on the top, all the rules that we talked about apply. Only that the first and the last note need to be the fundamental of the scale. So have fun creating all these examples, and you can do them in any key. Try to do one in the key of G, another one, I mean, with a G clef. If you want, do most of your exercises in the key of C, just so you get used to the rules. Once the rules are not a problem, then you can go to other keys so you can practice your other scales. You may also do them with the C clef in third or fourth line. And then these are a sample of the exercises that I would like you to do. And just do it. And I hope you like them and learn. We'll continue with more lessons. So if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe to our videos. And if you liked it, just say that you like it. You may have make a comment on any question that you may need. So we'll see you next time. My name is again Alfredo Aranda, and I will be helping you in the following videos. You have a great day.